What's up, everybody? Welcome to the History Things podcast. I'm your co-host, Pat McGuire.
And I'm your co-host, Matt Borders.
And we're here tonight just to sort of tell you a little bit about the show before you kick off on this weird and amazing journey that we call the History Things podcast. For everyone tuning in for the very first time, Matt, what is the History Things podcast?
Well, Pat, the History Things podcast is a conversational approach to history. Pat and I are going to take some of the best-known stories of history and some that you may not be familiar with at all and talk about them here on the History Things podcast.
I do love the ones that are weird and unheard of, so if you're prepared to go down rabbit holes, we're prepared to go down rabbit holes.
Pat, where can folks find the History Things podcast?
So if you want to hang out with us on this crazy journey that we call a show, you can find us on most major podcast apps. And I'm talking your Apple Podcast, your Spotify, your Google Play. Think of your major ones, we're there. Think of your non-major ones, we're on most of those too.
True.
You can even ask your Amazon Alexa app to play the History Things podcast.
And it totally works.
Yeah, it does. I just showed Matt today. Just simply say, Alexa, play the History Things podcast. So, Matt, before we go on the journey that is the History Things podcast, it's probably best that we tell the listeners a little bit about who we are. Matt, who are you?
My name's Matt Borders, and I'm an author, park ranger, and historian with primarily focuses on the American Civil War era and the early 20th century. Now, I've got a couple of books under my belt and a couple of degrees, but we're going to be diving into the fun stuff out there, though talking quite a bit about proper research and citation, all that good stuff, too.
I'm a construction contractor.
Wow.
Yeah. In reality, I'm just a huge history nerd. I've had a deep passion for the subject my entire life. I've been a lot of things before I attempted to be a public historian. I've been a musician, and I purified water for a long time. But I've always been at the core of who I am, just a big history dork, a history nerd. And a few years ago, I created a brand on Facebook called History Things with Pat. I didn't really know what it was going to be. I knew that I wanted to tell stories. I kind of did. I just came in like a wrecking ball. Cue the Miley Cyrus. But no, and I've been fortunate enough to meet a lot of amazing people who have helped me elevate my game and teach me. My co-host here, Matt, most chiefly among them. So that's kind of who we are. We are a amateur public historian and a professional author, park ranger. And just to be clear out there for everybody listening, if you know where if you know where Matt is a park ranger, nothing here tonight is officially representative of his job as a park ranger. So he's coming at you unfiltered, uncensored. Raw. Matt Borders raw. So just a big couple of history nerds that wanted to share some of our favorite stories with you, just like Matt was saying. So we thank you all for kicking off with us here on the History Things podcast. It's a wild ride. There's some deep stuff out there. No pun intended, but absolutely a pun intended if you're listening in our first season there. And just kind of what are we going to expect here on the show? Matt and I are Civil War guys, so you're going to hear a lot of that.
Oh, yes.
That's obvious, because that's who we are. You
right.
know that. You're going to hear a lot about the First World War. But that's also obvious, because that's kind of also who Matt and I are. But you're looking for things like maybe, say, a story about the Titanic. Well, guess what? That's out there. And a number of other stories that you're not really expecting to hear from a couple of military history nerds like us. So
right.
we thank you for joining us, and we hope you enjoy the show. Enjoy the ride and all that, and we encourage you to be interactive with it. So if you're liking the show and you're looking for ways to help us out as you're listening along, leave us a review on your favorite podcast app. Make sure that you leave us a 5-star rating. That'd be really cool. And if you guys have questions, reach out to us through email at historythingspodcast@gmail.com or through all of our social medias. Once again, that's at History Things Podcast on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Other than that, guys, enjoy the show. Thanks for hanging out with us. Again, I'm your co-host, Pat McGuire. This is my co-host, Matt Borders. This is the History Things podcast. Buckle up, guys. We're on our way. Thanks for listening.
See ya.